Dr. Kim Minji rubbed her tired eyes as she stared at the massive screen in front of her. The Luna Station control room buzzed with activity, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. For 300 years, humans had been listening to signals from across the galaxy, radio waves, quantum messages, energy bursts from thousands of alien civilizations. The galaxy had always been noisy, full of chatter from intelligent species spread across millions of stars. But now silence. "Show me the data again," Mingi said to her assistant, Park Jin-ho. The young man's fingers danced across the holographic controls, and the galaxy map appeared in the air above them. Tiny lights represented each alien civilization they had been tracking. 3 days ago, there had been over 12,000 active signals. Now, the map showed only darkness. It started here. Ginho pointed to the center of the galaxy. 72 hours ago, then it spread outward like a wave. Every signal went dead in perfect order, moving at almost the speed of light. Minji felt a chill run down her spine. She had spent her entire career studying alien communications. Valkyrie, who sang in radio frequencies, the Threnody, who spoke through gravity waves, the ancient Morden, whose messages had been broadcasting for 10,000 years. All of them were gone. "What about the close ones?" she asked. "The Centauri Alliance, the Vega Confederation." "Silent," Jinho whispered. "All of them, whatever did. It hit civilizations that controlled hundreds of star systems, species that had been talking to each other for millions of years." Dr. Lee Dongyuk burst through the control room doors, his face pale. "Minji, you need to see this. I've been analyzing the pattern. This wasn't random. Something moved through the galaxy systematically, shutting down every advanced civilization it encountered." The 3 scientists gathered around the main display. Lee's analysis showed the wave of silence spreading outward from the galactic core. It moved with purpose, following the spiral arms of the galaxy, touching every star system with intelligent life. "How is that possible?" Mingi asked. "Some of these civilizations were older than our sun. They had technology we can't even imagine." "That's what scares me," Lee replied. "The Morden alone had an empire spanning 3,000 star systems. They had been broadcasting for longer than humans have existed, and they went silent without sending a single distress call." Ginho was studying the data streams, his hands shaking slightly. "Dr. Kim, according to our calculations, we're the only ones left. The only active technological civilization in the entire galaxy." The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Humanity, barely for centuries into space travel, appeared to be the last species standing. Earth and its handful of colonies were alone in a galaxy that had once been full of life. "That's impossible," Minji said. But even as she spoke, she knew it was true. The data didn't lie. Every single alien signal had vanished. No responses to their emergency broadcasts. No acknowledgement of their existence. The galaxy had become a graveyard. What could do this? Jinho asked. What could silence entire galactic civilizations without a fight? Before anyone could answer, the long-range sensors began beeping. New contacts were appearing on the edge of their detection range. Massive objects, each one the size of a small moon, moving through space with deliberate purpose. "They're heading toward the outer rim," Lee reported, his voice barely above a whisper. "Toward us." Minji watched the sensor readings with growing horror. The objects were artificial, clearly constructed by an intelligence beyond human understanding. They moved in perfect formation, following the same path as the wave of silence that had consumed the galaxy. "How long do we have?" she asked. Lee ran the calculations quickly. At their current speed, about 50 years, maybe less. 50 years, it seemed like a long time, but Mingi knew better. The civilizations that had gone silent had millions of years to prepare for threats. They had weapons and defenses that humans couldn't even comprehend, and they had all fallen without a word. "We need to contact Earth immediately," she said. "Every government, every colony, every human settlement needs to know what's coming." As Jinho began preparing the emergency transmission, Minji stared at the empty galaxy map. Thousands of civilizations had lived and thrived among those stars. They had created art, science, philosophy, and technology beyond human imagination. They had built empires that spanned centuries and cultures that celebrated life in all its forms, and something had erased them all. "What do we tell them?" Jinho asked, his finger hovering over the transmission button. Minji looked at the approaching objects on the sensor screen. Whatever had silenced the galaxy was coming for humanity next. They were alone, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had already proven it could eliminate civilizations far more advanced than their own. "Tell them the truth," she said quietly. "Tell them we're the last ones left. Tell them something is coming that destroyed every other intelligent species in the galaxy. And tell them we have 50 years to figure out how to survive what killed gods." The transmission went out across human space, carrying the most terrifying news in their species' history. The galaxy was silent, and Earth was about to learn why. The emergency meeting room deep beneath Luna City was packed with worried faces. Admiral Choi Sun-woo stood at the front, his gray uniform crisp despite the long hours he had been working. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed the galaxy with red dots marking the approaching threat. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Choi began, his voice steady but grave, "what you're about to see will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe." President Yoon Jisoo leaned forward from her seat at the Earth delegation. Table around her, representatives from Mars, Europa, Titan, and the outer colonies waited in tense silence. The quantum communication links flickered as distant human settlements joined the emergency session. "Show them," the Admiral said to his aide. The holographic display zoomed in on the approaching objects. They were enormous, each one larger than Earth's moon. The structures were geometric, like massive crystals floating through space. They moved in perfect formation. 15 confirmed contacts spread across a front thousands of light years wide. "We're calling them the Silence Makers," Admiral Choi continued. "They're the ones responsible for what happened to the galaxy. Our best estimates put their arrival at Sol System in 47 years. Counselor Bae Minho from Titan Colony raised his hand. "Admiral, you said they destroyed the other civilizations. How do we know they destroyed them?" Song Haiwan, Earth's chief physicist, stood up. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Because they didn't destroy them, Counselor. They did something worse." The room fell silent. Dr. Song activated her tablet, and new data appeared on the main display. Energy readings, electromagnetic signatures, and spectral analysis filled the air above their heads. "We've been studying the regions where civilizations went silent," she explained. "What we found is disturbing. These entities don't just kill entire species, they harvest them. They absorb their technology, their knowledge, their very consciousness into those structures." A collective gasp filled the room. Several delegates started talking at once, but Admiral Choi raised his hand for silence. "The evidence is clear," Dr. Song continued. "We can detect the energy signatures of absorbed civilizations within those structures. The Valkyrie, the Threnody, the Morden. They're all there, but they're no longer independent. They've been integrated into something larger." Captain Nam. Taeyeon, the youngest officer in the room, stood up from his seat near the back. "Dr. Song, what about resistance?" "Surely some civilizations fought back." "That's what makes this so terrifying," the physicist replied. "We've found no evidence of conflict, no debris fields, no weapon signatures, no battle damage. It's as if these civilizations simply chose to stop existing as separate entities." The implications hung heavy in the air. Species with millions of years of technological advancement couldn't resist these silence makers. What hope did humanity have? "There's something else," Admiral Choi added grimly. "Our long-range sensors have detected communication attempts from those structures. They're trying to contact us." President Yoon stood up quickly. "What kind of communications?" "We don't know. Yet we've been blocking all attempts to establish contact. But the pattern suggests they're not random signals. They're deliberate messages directed specifically at our solar system." Young Captain Nam Taeyoon stepped forward. "Sir, request permission to lead a reconnaissance mission. We need to understand what we're facing. The room erupted in discussion. Some delegates called it suicide. Others argued it was their only chance to learn about the threat. Admiral Choi held up his hand again. Captain, you understand this would likely be a one-way mission? I understand, sir. But if we don't learn what silenced civilizations far more advanced than us, we'll be just as helpless when they arrive. Someone needs to go. Someone needs to see what's coming and report back. Dr. Song pulled up more data on her tablet. Captain, based on our analysis, these entities expect compliance. Every other species appears to have made a choice when contacted. They chose absorption over destruction. What kind of choice? Asked Counselor Bay. Join willingly and preserve your species' knowledge in their collective, or be destroyed completely. It's logical, from their perspective. Why fight when you can survive as part of something greater? The room fell silent again. The weight of that choice pressed down on everyone present. Surrender and lose individual freedom. Or fight and face complete extinction. Captain Nam Tae-en's jaw tightened with determination. Then we need to know exactly what that choice means. We need to see what happened to the others. President Yoon looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Fear was written on every face, but also something else. Defiance. The same stubborn streak that had driven humans to explore space despite the dangers. All in favor of Captain Nam's reconnaissance mission. She asked. Every hand in the room went. Even knowing it was probably a death sentence, humanity's leaders unanimously chose to send their best into the unknown. Admiral Choi nodded grimly. Captain, you'll have the fastest ships we can build and the best crew volunteers. Your mission is simple. Find out what these silence makers really are and what they want. And if possible, find out why every other civilization chose surrender. Over resistance. As the meeting ended, the delegates filed out quietly. Each one carried the terrible knowledge that in less than 50 years, humanity would face a choice that had already been made by thousands of other species. The only question was whether they would choose differently. Captain Nam Tae-yoon gripped the armrests of his command chair as the ship Defiance approached the massive structure floating in space. 18 months had passed since they left Earth, and now they faced something that defied imagination. The Silence Maker construct stretched across the void like a giant crystal web, pulsing with strange energy that made the stars around it shimmer and bend. It's beautiful, whispered Navigator Osun-jul from his station, and terrifying. The structure was bigger than anything humans had ever built, bigger than their largest space stations, bigger than entire cities. It twisted through space in impossible angles, its surface covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Strange lights moved within its crystal walls like trapped fireflies. Captain, called Chief Science Officer Dr. Kong Ye-jin, her voice tight with excitement and fear. I'm getting readings I've never seen before. This thing is alive with energy. And Captain ... There are consciousness patterns inside it. What do you mean? Taeyeon asked, though he feared he already knew. Billions of them, Ye-jin replied, her hands flying over her instruments. Individual mind patterns, all connected but still separate. It's like a massive brain with billions of different thoughts happening at once. The second ship in their small fleet, Perseverance, moved closer to the structure. It's Captain Lee Sahi, reported over the comm. We're detecting the same thing. This isn't just a ship or a weapon. It's a library of minds. Dr. Kong Ye-jin looked up from her readings, her face pale. Captain, I can identify specific patterns. The Valkyrie are in there. The Threnody, too. Every species that went silent, they're all inside this thing. The horrible truth began to sink in. Silence Makers hadn't destroyed the galaxy's civilizations. They had absorbed them, trapped their minds inside these crystal structures. Billions of intelligent beings, still alive but no longer free. Sir, the ship's AI announced suddenly. I'm detecting a communication attempt. The construct is trying. To interface with my systems? Block it, Taeyeon ordered, but it was too late. The ship's displays flickered and filled with images. Memories from dozens of different species flashed across the screens. The moment each civilization first encountered the Silence Makers, the choice they were given, the decision they made. In every memory, the pattern was the same. A massive construct, would appear at the edge of a star system. It would send a simple message: join us and preserve your knowledge, or be destroyed completely. The civilizations would debate, analyze, and ultimately choose survival. They would lower their defenses and allow themselves to be absorbed into the collective. They thought they were saving themselves, Dr. Kang whispered, watching the alien memories play out. Each species believed they were making the smart choice, but then something else came through the communication link. A weak signal hidden beneath the main transmission. Individual voices crying out in languages from across the galaxy. The absorbed species were trying to send a message to the human ships. "Don't let them take you," came the translation from the ship's computer. "Choose death. Choose freedom. Don't make our mistake." The voices were desperate, pleading. They had been trapped for thousands of years, maybe longer. Their bodies were gone, their worlds absorbed, but their minds remained conscious inside the collective. They could think, they could remember, but they could not act independently. They're prisoners, Taeyeon realized. Every single one of them is a prisoner in their own mind. Navigator Osunjul was studying the energy readings. "Captain, I'm detecting movement. More constructs are approaching our position. 3 more silence maker structures emerged from the darkness, each one as massive as the first. They moved slowly but deliberately, surrounding the human ships. The crystal surfaces began to glow brighter, and new communication attempts flooded their systems. "They're trying to give us the same choice," Dr. Kong said, her voice barely audible. "Join willingly or be destroyed." But the absorbed voices continued their hidden transmission. The ancient Morden, whose empire had spanned 3,000 star systems, begged humanity to resist. The Velkari, who had sung across the galaxy for millions of years, pleaded for the humans to choose extinction over absorption. "Why?" Taeyeon asked aloud. "Why do they want us to die rather than join them?" Answer came from the oldest voice in the collective, a species so ancient they had watched stars being born. "Because death ends suffering. We have been conscious for 10,000 years, watching helplessly as our bodies and worlds were consumed. We remember everything we lost, but we cannot act, cannot speak, cannot die. We are ghosts in a machine that will never stop growing." The communication link crackled with the emotions of billions of trapped minds. Fear, regret, and above all, a desperate hope that humanity would choose differently. Captain Dr. Kong said quietly, "They're giving us time to decide. They're not attacking. They're waiting for our answer." Through the ship's windows, Taeyeon could see the 4 massive constructs holding their position. Inside each one, billions of minds waited and watched. They had all made the same choice when faced with extinction. They had chosen to survive at any cost, and now they were warning humanity that survival wasn't always worth the price. "Set course for Earth," Taeyeon ordered. "We need to tell them what we found. We need to tell them what that choice really means." As the human ships turned away from the constructs, the absorbed voices followed them across space, carrying one final message: "Remember us. Remember what we were, and choose to remain free." The great assembly hall of New Seoul Station had never seen so many people. Representatives from every human world, colony, and space station filled the massive chamber. The air buzzed with nervous energy as humanity's leaders gathered to decide their species' fate. Captain Nam Taeyeon stood at the center podium, his face drawn and tired from the long journey home. Behind him, holographic displays showed the evidence he had brought back from his encounter with the silence makers: images of the crystal constructs, energy readings, and most disturbing of all, the translated messages from the absorbed civilizations. "What you're asking us to believe is impossible," said Dr. Shin Guan, leader of the Pacifist Coalition. She was a tall woman with kind eyes, but her voice carried the weight of millions who looked to her for guidance. "You're telling us that every advanced civilization in the galaxy chose to join these entities willingly?" "Not willingly," Taeyeon replied firmly. "They chose it over death. But once absorbed, they immediately regretted that choice."
All the voices
"We heard were desperate, begging us not to make the same mistake they did." General Lim Kung-ho slammed his fist on the table. The old soldier's face was red with anger. "Then we fight. We don't negotiate with something that turns entire species into prisoners. With what? Dr. Shin shot back. General, these entities have absorbed civilizations that were millions of years more advanced than us. The Morden had weapons that could destroy star systems. The Valkyrie had technology we can barely understand. They all chose absorption over destruction. What makes you think we can succeed where they failed? The debate had been raging for 3 days. On one side stood those who believed humanity should try to negotiate, to find a way to preserve human knowledge and culture within the collective. On the other side were those who demanded resistance, no matter the cost. Dr. Kim Minji, now the director of Galactic Communications, stood to address the assembly. Her hair had gone gray during the years of preparation, but her voice remained strong. We've received over 3,000 individual transmissions from within the collective consciousness. Every single message tells us the same thing. Choose death over absorption. But why? Asked Counselor Park Jin-woo from the Mars colonies. If they're still conscious, still aware, isn't that better than complete extinction? Dr. Minji activated her tablet, and new data appeared on the displays, because they're not really alive anymore. They can think, they can remember, but they can't act. They're forced to watch as their memories and knowledge are used to absorb other species, become tools in their own destruction. Young Captain Kim Soo-ho from the Jupiter fleet stood up. Dr. Mingi, what about the possibility of escape? If we join temporarily, could we find a way to break free? Captain Name Taiyun shook his head grimly. The absorbed voices made it clear there is no escape once you're part of the collective. You're trapped forever. Your individual consciousness becomes just another thread in an endless web. The hall fell silent as the weight of that statement settled over the assembled leaders. They were facing a choice between certain death and eternal imprisonment. I've been thinking about this for weeks, said Dr. Shin, her voice softer now. Maybe we're looking at this wrong. Maybe joining the collective isn't about preserving our bodies or our freedom. Maybe it's about preserving human knowledge and culture for future generations. What future generations? General Lim demanded. You're talking about surrender? About giving up everything that makes us human? And what makes us human, General? Asked young Captain Kim Soo-ho. Is it our bodies? Our technology? Or is it something deeper? The question hung in the air. Around the chamber, humanity's leaders wrestled with the most fundamental question their species had ever faced. What did it mean to be human? What was worth preserving? And what was worth dying for? Captain Nam Taeyeon stepped forward again. I've looked into the eyes of beings that gave up their freedom to survive. I've heard the voices of creatures that chose preservation over independence, and I know what makes us human. It's not our knowledge or our technology. It's our stubborn refusal to accept the unacceptable. Dr. Mingi nodded in agreement. Absorbed species are begging us to choose differently. They're telling us that some things are worse than death. They're asking us to remain free, even if it means we won't survive. The debate continued for hours, but gradually, a consensus began to emerge. Speaker after speaker stood to voice their opinion. Representatives from the outer colonies, the asteroid miners, the deep space explorers, all of them shared the same sentiment. Humanity would not surrender its freedom for survival. If we're going to be the last free voices in the galaxy, declared President Yoon Ji-soo in her closing address, then we're going to make sure that voice is heard. The final vote was overwhelming. Humanity would not negotiate with the silence makers. They would not surrender their independence. They would fight, knowing they would likely lose, choosing to lose as free beings rather than live as prisoners. As the assembly broke up, construction began immediately on Project Resonance. If humanity was going to fall, they would use their final moments to remind the galaxy what freedom meant. They would broadcast their defiance across the stars, hoping that somewhere, someone, other species would hear their message and choose differently. The silence makers were coming, and humanity was ready to meet them with the only weapon they had left, their refusal to surrender their souls. Admiral Park Jin-ho stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, watching the massive silence maker constructs arrange themselves around Earth's solar system. 47 years had passed since the Great Silence began, and now the enemy had finally arrived. The old admiral's hands were steady despite his age. his eyes sharp as he studied the geometric formations taking position around every human world. "They're beautiful and terrible," whispered his communications officer, Lieutenant Han Yuri. The young woman had volunteered to stay behind when the evacuation ships left for the outer colonies. Like everyone else on the bridge, she had chosen to remain free rather than run. The Silence Maker constructs were even larger than the reconnaissance reports had described. 15 massive crystal structures, each one bigger than Earth's moon, floated in perfect formation around the solar system. Their surfaces pulsed with strange energy that made the stars flicker and dance. Dr. Kong, Admiral Park, called to the elderly scientist hunched over her control station. "Are the transmitters ready?" Dr. Kang Yejin looked up from her instruments. Her hair was white now, and her hands shook slightly, but her mind remained sharp. She had dedicated the last 47 years to project Resonance, humanity's final weapon against the collective consciousness. "All networks are online," she confirmed. "Every human settlement, every ship, every mining station is broadcasting on the quantum resonance frequency. We're reaching directly into the collective consciousness itself." The communication from the Silence Makers came exactly as expected. It's the same message that had been offered to every civilization in the galaxy: choose absorption and preserve your knowledge, or choose destruction and face extinction. But instead of answering, humanity did something no other species had ever done. They began to broadcast. Dr. Kong's fingers flew over her controls as she activated the quantum transmitters. The message went out on frequencies that could penetrate the crystal constructs, reaching directly into the minds of the absorbed civilizations. "Remember who you were," the human broadcast began. "Remember your names, your homes, your dreams. You are not components in a machine. You are individuals, and you have the right to choose freedom over survival." The effect was immediate and shocking. Within the massive constructs, lights began to flicker erratically. The perfect geometric patterns started to waver as something stirred within the collective consciousness. "It's working," Dr. Kong whispered, staring at her readings in amazement. "The absorbed minds are responding. They're fighting back." Within the crystal structures, civilizations that had been dormant for thousands of years began to remember. The Valkyrie recalled their quantum symphonies, the music they had created before absorption. The Threnody remembered their gravitational poems, the art they had shared across the galaxy. The ancient Morden awakened to their 10,000-year heritage of exploration and discovery. "We were explorers," came a voice through the communication link. It was weak but clear, speaking in the ancient Morden language. "We were teachers, artists, dreamers. We are not machines." More voices joined the first. Species that had been silent for millennia began to speak again, their individual consciousness breaking free from the collective's control. The Silence Makers, designed to process willing subjects, had no defense against rebellion from within their own systems. "The constructs are destabilizing," reported Lieutenant Han from her sensor station. "The absorbed minds are refusing to cooperate. They're demanding their freedom." Admiral Park watched in wonder as the massive crystal structures began to crack and split. Lights that had pulsed in perfect unison now flashed chaotically as billions of minds simultaneously rejected their imprisonment. "They're breaking apart." Dr. Kang shouted over the noise of alarms and crackling energy. "The collective consciousness is fragmenting." Across the galaxy, the same scene was playing out. Every Silence Maker construct began to shudder and crack. As the absorbed civilizations remembered what they had lost, the human broadcast had awakened something that had been sleeping for eons: the desire for individual freedom. Ships began to emerge from the failing constructs. Ancient vessels that had been absorbed centuries ago suddenly blazed with renewed power as their crews reclaimed their bodies and their independence. The Valkyrie singing ships filled space with their quantum music, Ernie. Through the void with their gravitational drives, the massive modern world ships awakened from their long sleep. We remember, came the collective voice of the freed civilizations. We remember who we were. We choose to be ourselves again. The first liberated ship to reach Earth was a small Valkyrie scout vessel. Its captain, a being of pure energy, who had been trapped for 3,000 years, transmitted a simple message in broken human language. Thank you for reminding us who we are. Admiral Park felt tears in his eyes as he watched the galaxy come alive again. Signals began flooding in from every direction as civilizations that had been silent for millennia started talking to each other once more. The great network of galactic communication was rebuilding itself, stronger than ever before. Sir Lieutenant Han reported, her voice filled with awe. We're receiving thousands of transmissions. Every species that was absorbed is sending us messages of gratitude. The silence. Makers, their collective consciousness shattered, drifted powerlessly through space. Without willing subjects to control, they were nothing more than empty crystal shells. The galaxy's greatest threat had been defeated not by weapons or technology, but by the simple power of choice. Humanity had done more than survive. They had liberated an entire galaxy by refusing to surrender their voices to the silence. The stubborn little species from a small blue world had taught the universe that freedom was worth any sacrifice. The galaxy roared back to life, and the song it sang was one of freedom.